Okay, let's talk about um, intro into design. If we're making or designing anything, just the very, very basics, especially when you're thinking about making it for a customer or making it for yourself. Um, it's three things you want to kind of think about. Because we're making functional things, what is the function? What is the intended purpose? And does it fit that? It has to fit that well. So, are the things that need to be seen easily visible? Are they biggest? Are they prominent? Um, and then does it like if there are questions to be answered or information that has to be shared, does it contain all those? That seems real basic, but I think a lot of people do fail at that. You can see that failure when you're having to go back and ask another question. Say, yeah, but what about this thing? And what about this thing? And what about this thing? And I can't see this thing. Um, so it does need to have that. So function is the first one. Um, The second most simple one is that it fits whatever branding it is for whatever customer. So if you're making something for Lake Time, what does her branding look like? Does it have her logos and fonts? Does it have like her kind of color scheme? For our branding, I don't do a lot of crazy stuff. I stick with black, white, grays. I use Futura bold in all caps on pretty much everything. Occasionally, I'll drop in a smaller basic font if I don't want it to have a prominent visual. But for the most part, I just keep it real basic. Um, yeah, all blacks, white, grays, nothing too crazy. But each customer and their brand is going to be a little bit different. So paying attention to that, knowing their brand is the key with that. Those two are fairly simple. The third one is art school term would be called visual hierarchy, but really it is just what are the most important things and making sure those are big and bold and prominent and look good. And then within that comes the craftsmanship portion. Just like when you turned in a paper in college, it had to be formatted and look right. Things had to be lined up correctly. Indents on the paragraphs had to be done right. The grammar and the spelling had to be done right. And if you didn't do that, you're going to get your paperback bleeding. I mean, and that's on some level it's really basics in writing from what we did from probably the eighth grade on. um that needs to be done with graphics too. That stuff has to be correct. So let's look at some examples and I'll show different examples. So this is obviously the flyer I made for us. I didn't do a lot of colors. I did some blacks, white transparencies, nothing crazy. So the number one, the big prominent thing, what do I really want? Visual hierarchy. Number one, I want it to be that. So that's what it is. There is all this other information that tells them what they need and even drop in a little bit of logo branding for us, but it's not big and prominent. So visual hierarchy, numero uno is the picture. I want them to see the hat and what we got. Then I want them to know, okay, what is this? Next highest visual hierarchy. So there you go. Those are my two next biggest things that I have. They're not as prominent, they're the secondary. Printed foam truckers, unlimited print colors. Then I got my tertiary, 7 each, and then I do got to have this thing down at the bottom. That gives us all the information instead of some of it. And then they come back and say, yeah, but now I want this one. And now you're having to go back and say, actually, no, that one doesn't apply because I didn't actually put in all the information the first time. So that's all that. That's your visual hierarchy. It hits the branding. It serves the needs. Formatting's good. There are no squiggly lines underneath the letters or anything, so I know like my spell check's good. Everything here is lined up the same way in alignment. It's not in random places. It's not all over the place. It's very, very good for that. So the two tools I use the most with an Illustrator to make sure it is that way is one, my smart guides. So I always make sure I got view smart guides on, which also command U. And you can tell that by if you make an element and you move it around, you start seeing those little, when it lines up with other things, you can see them pop up there, those little purple guidelines. So it makes it really easy when you have all sorts of different things and you're placing them in to make sure it's actually lined up and aligned with other pieces. That's the really easy one. Another really easy one to always make sure it's on. Edit. Let's see if I can even find this because I don't, it's always on for me. Spelling, auto spell check gives you that wonderful squiggly line. Okay, let's look at some more that I did that way. Here's another really, really simple one. Again, visual hierarchy. What's most bold and prominent and big and easy to read? Custom beanies delivered to your door by Christmas. So my main thing that I want to get is that. This particular one, and it still fits our branding. Futura bold, all caps, blacks, whites, nothing special. You know, secondary information, but needed because you have to have that. It has to hit the function, is that it does have that. But the primary is this big thing in the middle. Secondary is that. And then I got some design elements in the background, but I changed the transparency of those to not visually draw it away. So it still looks good, but it's not too much. So again, like something even as simple as that follows that visual hierarchy. Let's see, what else do we got? This one is again super simple. Follows the same thing though. So again, blacks, whites, visual hierarchy, who we are, and what is this resource that I'm giving them, the big things they need to know, secondary, and then tertiary visual hierarchy is this stuff, and I know all this stuff seems super basic. It is so important to get it right though. So what you're noticing though is, hey, all these are lined up the same way. The spacing I have in between each one is the same for each one. I have some things in bold to show that those are more prominent, are more necessary, and I have other things that are in the lowercase. Still all Futura bold this, still all fits our branding, but it does hit that visual hierarchy. It's formatted correctly, so everything's clean and looks the same. You notice I got my same margins around the entire thing. Spacing of all these is all spaced out the same, and that is all easy to do with those alignment tools as well. Illustrator gives us all these tools to do, so it's super, super easy. Let's see. There was another one that I made that, again, same way. Fits our branding, blacks, whites, Futura bold. Again, notice you don't see a ton of squiggly lines under anything, so everything has been it's grammatically correct, and I have read and checked over all too to make sure that that is grammatically correct. It's not that you're going to hit it every time, but man, stuff shouldn't have 5, 6, 10, things in it, and it definitely shouldn't have typos. The spell check for sure should check the typos, and then the grammar's on us to check that and read that right. But you'll see even in these, the visual hierarchy. The visual hierarchy is the steps, and then I have a lot of words here, but really I'm highlighting more value, new role, or be promoted, and then then it gets into the function. It has to have the steps, and those are just written in as short of ways as I can succinctly make whatever needs to be mentioned in there. I don't add any more than what I have to. I try and actually include everything that's needed in as few words as possible. So let's see, something like a resource like this, does that hit those things? Is our spacing all the same? Has spell check been checked? Does this have any visual hierarchy to it, or does it all just kind of look the same? What is this thing that we're giving this resource to a person? Do they know what it is? Okay, we're thinking about embroidery, but also are we thinking about complexity and size, garment choice, font of choice, and making sure everything fits those things, fits our branding, making sure we are double checking things and using that accomplished is spelled wrong. Like this one, it's even pointing it out to us. Hat, beanie, polo, that should have another comma there. And it's awesome that we have those tools because they just make it easy for us. They point those out to us. Making sure, again, visual hierarchy, that like your spacing is the same between each element to make sure they're the same. And sometimes I will use all to the left justified stuff, and it can look okay. This would be one that's got a lot of left justified stuff. This one certainly has all left justified stuff, and that looks good. Just depending on what you're trying to accomplish, I think that works better for like lists, things like that. When you're doing something like that, makes it look a little more interesting, very, very clean and easy to understand and read. Whereas, this one, because I knew the function of what this was being made for. This was primarily being made for email promos, so it's going to be viewed on a phone or it's going to be viewed in Instagram. Okay, well, if it's, say it's on an Instagram or a Facebook story, well, this formatting is going to work better for that because I understand the final function of what I'm building this resource for. So I think this would be a good one to practice that stuff on and see what you can do with it to give it that visual hierarchy, make sure it fits our branding, make sure you're providing all the information they need without any extra either. Something we do in the Midwest a lot, let's see, is something like this. We put a statement like this: more complex designs. Well, there's no such thing as more complex. It either is complex or not. So just be complex designs don't work as well or don't work well. So it's just simplifying everything, shortening it as much as possible to make it clean, easier, simpler for the customer. And yet it still has to accomplish the goal too. Like right there's another typo. So that's the kind of stuff you want to kind of lock in and think about and look at when you're thinking about basics of design for anything. And I think about this stuff every time I do a mock-up. And that's why the primary thing in a mock-up is the graphic and the shirt, and does it look good, and is it big, and as big as I can get it on that mock-up, and is it prominent? That way it's easy to visually see. But then also we do have to have the secondary and the tertiary goals of the hierarchy that it still hits. Still gives us all the information we need, like Pantones, and shows that to the customer, but that's a secondary thing. That's not a primary thing. Or like the disclaimer at the bottom, that's a tertiary thing. It's a necessary thing, but we don't want that to be big and bold and prominent. It's not important. It's not the highest level of importance visually, and yet still keeping it all clean, keeping everything spelled right, keeping the grammar good, and keeping things formatted so margin and spacing is consistent throughout whatever that resource is. So remember the three big steps to basics of design. Anything does it fit whatever branding we're creating it for? Does it solve the function in the platform it goes to, or whatever the need is that this resource is being made for? And finally, 3, hierarchy of visuals. That's it.